Dan Friedrich. I'm the Global Business Solutions Manager for Marketing and Sales for the Nestle company. So all the solutions around the world, I'm in charge of that. One of the reasons why I'm sitting here, I guess, to talk to you is I have a pretty long background in marketing and sales. Over 35 years. Started out with the Kellogg company in marketing. Then I went to H.J. Heinz company in marketing, sales. Was the general manager of Foodservice, general manager of Worldwide Infant Nutrition, general manager of pet food, so a lot of different categories, sauces and gravies. And then I went to a non-food company, Fort James. It was a paper company, so things like paper towels and napkins, things like that. And then Nestle Waters, which that's when I joined Nestle, and was almost all marketing and sales, general management type roles. And then went to Vevey, Switzerland. That's where I'm living now. So it's been a good ride. I've been there for about 3 years. So that's my background. Spent a lot of time in this area.
Rob?
Yes, my name is Rob Krone. I'm the Director of Finance for Dannon, North America's food service business. We are about $200 million business in the U.S., which again is maybe not so behemoth for some of the folks in the room, but for Dannon, it's Dannon's largest food service business in the world at $200 million. My background, I started unlike the other gentleman up here, I'm a finance person. I started my career in accounting. I'm a CPA. I guess I can admit I have an MBA, although I know maybe that's not so popular from this time.
Careful how you say it.
But it's not from an elitist school, so maybe I feel a little better. And I have about 14 years with Dannon US. I spent a little bit of time at Unilever early in my career, and I also worked with Dreyer's Eaties for a while. So I probably have about 20 years in consumer products, but really probably less than 5 in food service. So as I'm learning, there's a lot to learn. And we've been on AFS for about 18 months. And frankly, we acquired the Yo Cream business, which is a soft-serve frozen yogurt. Any of you that have been in a Froyo shop, there's a good chance you've eaten our product. So when Dannon acquired that in 2011, food service went from 5% of our business to 10% of our business overnight. So that sort of triggered the conversations around it's probably time to figure out where we're spending all this money and what it's doing for us. So when I started asking fairly basic questions about how might we go about that, it became pretty clear that we didn't have really any idea where we were spending all of this money, and it was in various states of disarray of emails, cocktail napkins, and anything else you can imagine. So that's how I come to be here today, and we'll talk more about it, but we're a year and a half in, and I would say that it's slow, steady progress toward the end game.
Hi, I'm John Kittle from Popcorn, Indiana. I'm the VP of Business Planning and Development, or Insight. If we look at this slide, it doesn't matter. But anyway, I was brought in originally to Popcorn, Indiana to implement a trade system and then actually tie it all together with category development and whatnot. Recently, I've also acquired responsibility for the grocery and the natural teams. So adding that to the work responsibilities for Popcorn, Indiana. Previously started my career 21 years with Nabisco. Never sold a cookie or a cracker. I was always in the planners or the lifesavers division or specialty products. And then I also spent some time at Meow Mix, which was a venture capital from 2002 to 2006. Followed that up with some time at Markel Paper. And then the role I'm in now, also spent some time on the vendor side of the business with IRI and actually with MEI as well.
Jeff Rose, VP of Sales at Gehl Foods. We're out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so everyone from Milwaukee is very happy to be here, obviously. I've been there about 13, 14 months now, but I actually started back in '91 in food service, so my whole career has been food service sales. True sales. I started with Campbell's Soup, schlepping a sample bag from door to door, and school mom to school mom. in the old days. Spent time with Michael Foods and Sara Lee and King and Prince Seafood, and now I'm here with Gehl Foods. So I've had the pleasure of working for large CPG publicly traded companies, private equity, and now family-owned businesses. So I have an appreciation for all parts and all sides of the business, and all the goods and the bads that go along with each one of them, obviously. But I came on board Gehl Foods, and they said to me, we're going to put you on part of this team that we're implementing this thing called Trade Pro. I said, okay, and I've learned ever since. So I actually came to the conference last year and started to learn and met Sue and people here and was able to start asking more intelligent questions along the way and taking that information back to the team. So we've been 10 months on the Trade Pro or the TPM system as of today. So.
All right, thanks, guys. That was great. Now, all of these guys have agreed to be very open and take questions from the audience. I mean, the goal here is to really give you folks a chance to interact and get your questions answered, and they're very open to sharing their input with you. So we want to try to make this all about you, not just a list of questions that we wanted to ask or they wanted to answer. So I'm going to start off with just kind of a general guideline question, but at that point, feel free to raise your hand. I've got the handheld mic. I'll try to get to you so that everybody in the room can hear your question, and then the guys will be more than happy to answer it. Obviously, trade promotion spending, this whole concept of managing trade spend, measuring, auditing for compliance and so forth is a hot topic in the industry. It's evolved considerably over the last number of years, I think. So maybe just for level setting purposes, if you could just talk a little bit about sort of the process of how you go about planning a promotion and sort of just walk us through what that looks like in your company, Dan.
Okay, we could start. So how do you start planning a promotion? Really, it starts with your strategic planning in general for your company, primarily in the marketing and the category management area as to where you want to take your products or your brands. So whether or not it's a trial generating item or expanded consumption or if you have a switching category, those type of things. And from there, then decide, okay, well, what actions do you need to take at retail? As I think everybody here knows you can't get anything done unless you spend some money and primarily drop the price. So I think those strategies first start with what are you trying to do, and then they move into the executional phase. I would say in our business, and I think this is across, not I think, it is across all the channels, there always needs to be some base level of promotion, unless your product is so unique, and very few are that it could sell without it. But in order to keep it moving and at least have some growth, I think everything has to have some promotion behind it. The ones where you don't get the really big returns, the items, obviously you want to do those as small as possible, but keep them alive. But for your other brands where you're actually trying to drive trial or you're trying to expand consumption, that's where you're trying to get a big display and significantly grow the business. Those are the ones really where you should be spending most of your money.
Rob, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I'll take it next. As I mentioned to my partners up here, I'll give this a slightly different slant from a food service perspective. So for the food service people in the room, generally, we generally think of everything in terms of contract price. So with some of my retail background from the past, when I think of promotion, I think of deals and high-low and that strategy. But for us in food service in Dannon, again, as I mentioned, step one was figuring out how much money we had and where was that money being effective. But quickly we sort of jump into, what is the purpose of food service in the organization, frankly? And I think, for anyone in the room that is on the food service side, depending on how big you are relative to the top line contribution of your companies, Sometimes, while that sounds like a simple question, it can be not so easy to get an answer to. Sort of aligning what is the purpose, and that can run the gamut from it should be a samples business to it needs to be at the same profit as retail, which is a very wide gap. So, but for us at Danone, it has certainly been a conversation that consistently comes back to margin. And certainly more recently with what milk prices have done in the past couple of years of a historical nature, frankly, both on the high side and the low side, margin is a continuous conversation. We also then, for us in Danone and Foodservice, we have a fairly large competitor by the name of General Mills. I'm not assuming there's any General Mills people in the room, but I'll choose my words carefully anyway. We sort of look at our portfolio of products versus theirs, and then try to, with some logic, put pricing and margin guidelines around our product groups, if you will. And then, of course, price those as we, for us, a big portion of the business is GPOs, or what we call national accounts. It's probably 65% of our mix at this point. So then it becomes very much a conversation of trying to sell value versus your competitor. And we try to do that with margins that we've aligned in the company. And then I guess the other thing I'd say, it came up a little earlier in the Foodservice breakout this morning, is we do see a trend, in food service. There's certainly two chains of people touching the money. There's the distributor and the operator, which is generally a bit different than retail. For me, we've evolved from a venue where the distributors claim to be selling and marketing on your behalf, and I think as we've continued to evolve and press through that, we've sort of started to think about putting more of the money toward where the consumers are ultimately taking the product, which is on the operator side. So at the same time, we continuously are evaluating the mix of the trade. Is it going to the operator or is it going to the distributor? So that's sort of how I would characterize that.
Yeah, so I think the how you promote really depends a lot on the life stage of the company and what your objectives are. So when I remember interviewing with Popcorn Indiana at the beginning of 2011, and our CEO said, I want to grow this business from a $23 million business to, by 2015, a $100 million business, and I want to cut trade spend by 10 points. That's a little challenging. So, but I really think it does come down to just understanding what it is, first of all, that drives incremental volume. And frankly, I think a lot of companies, definitely Popcorn Indiana, was not doing that, and we were running programs just based on the fact that the retailer expected us to run programs. And as Rob was alluding to with DSD, we're a DSD, we go to market to grocery through DSD, and same situation. We were basically, handing our distributor some money and saying, hey, go out and see what you can do with it. So that all went away. A trade promotion system obviously allows you to get a handle on where your spending is, and there's a little bit of a learning curve for the sales organization. But I think it really starts with understanding what's the most effective utilization of your funding, planning programs that will get you that, having some tough conversations with retailers, because retailers are used to, in our case, it was frequency. And they would want frequency, and they would want to be paid on everything they purchased as opposed to everything they sold through to the consumer. So we quickly converted them and said, we can actually go deeper and get you to deeper price points if we're only paying you based on what you sell to the consumer, and if we reduce the frequency a little bit. So we did that. And then it comes back to, once the program executes, the post-promotion analysis to understand, was it effective or not? Don't repeat the mistakes that you made, and carry on. And it's really a full circle process. And it all starts with, like I said, it starts with the company objectives. The good news is we cut trade spending 11%, and we hit $100 million last year. So he wanted to do it by 2015. We did it a year early, so that's good news.
Well, obviously the the planning process really, as Dan kind of alluded to, that John alluded to, was the fact that it's really based around the annual operating plan, right? It's what are we trying to achieve for the whole entire year? And of course, and as Rob had said, in food service it's a little different because in food service we're able to actually to reach out and touch the customer a little more effectively in the sense of, we don't necessarily have to trade spend to increase sales. We can literally do it account by account by account. So my first inclination when I got to Gehl Foods was the fact that I wanted to reiterate to everybody that we don't spend anything. We invest in everything, okay? And I think that's a key metric when we say in the play in words, because I don't want anybody going out and just spending money. I want to make sure that everyone's investing in what they're going to do because there's an expected return on whatever we actually invest in. So it really starts with a collaboration with sales and marketing. We put out together a marketing calendar. And an example that we in food service will do is where we actually invest in our money is through the innovation. And we heard this morning about entrepreneurship and innovation. And we hadn't been doing a lot of that at Gehl Foods, and now we are. We're actually really doing a lot more within the industry than some of our competitors, thank goodness. But when we make that initial investment into a new product, we do need to put some investment monies behind it, right? And so we generally, in food service, we coupon. We go to the operator, the end user, the consumers out there, and we'll coupon. And we will, we'll do it both. Actually, strategically, we want to do both with our distributor partners and with the operators. So we usually start with our distributors, then we move on to the operator side of the business because we do have investments in both sides of the business because distributors are our go-to market ability. So that's what we'll literally do from that perspective. So we start with planning. And generally, it's innovation now that we're making our investments in with new products, whether or not it's equipment and or products or flavors themselves for our business. So that's what we're planning on.
That's great. Great summary, guys. So I want to open this up to you folks, right? That was the whole idea, is to let you ask questions and really get a dialogue going here. So I will take any questions from anybody in the room. What would you like to know from these gentlemen?
Thank you. Charlie Beckett from Home Market Foods in Boston. I have a couple of questions really for Rob and Jeff about food service sales and what are the particular challenges that you've encountered trying to implement a trade promotion management system for food service. And the reason I'm asking that question, just to give you some context, is we're implementing AFS, what's really the retail version, and going to use it for both retail and food service. But I'm hoping to learn a few things along the way from you folks about do's and don'ts perhaps, and what are some of the challenges. Thank you.
Sure.
You want to go?
Jeff, you want to take that
Okay,
first?
I guess I'll start. Wow, that's a loaded question. How much time do we have? No, I mean, for us, I will tell you, for us, the TPM system is exactly what we need to have, right? We had absolutely zero insight into anything that we were doing. We have a document management system, but it's a big, dark chasm hole that things kind of go into and never get resurrected. So we needed that visibility, right? We needed the visibility into what our deals were. And one of the lessons learned, we learned the hard way, right? Because we implement the system, we run Trade Pro TPM, and next thing you know, we have these pendings just exputing all over the place, right? But because this was the case, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so it's not anything wrong or bad, but that's potentially one of the side effects of the things that we need to do in order to be better at what we're supposed to be doing, right? So, expect sometimes those pendings just to kind of increase, right? But we learned that I got to deal with this guy. What is it? And so that's a good problem to have, right? I guess the only other, there's lots of things we can talk about, but I think it's important to know that as best you possibly can, your naming conventions need to be very specific. And I will say that you don't even necessarily, well, there'll be people will disagree with me, but you can establish your own naming conventions, but what it really should be the naming convention should be placed into the contract what the bill back and claim is going to say. Okay? See what I'm saying? So I could call it one thing, and it can be exactly what it's supposed to be, but if that claim comes back, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm old food service, everything's a bill back to me, okay? But when a claim comes in, all right, and it doesn't exactly say exactly what it is, again, it could go on a pending side, right? And it's a good issue to be having, so it makes you research it, but make sure it's named the way it's supposed to be. Not from my perspective, but from the claim and what that distributor or operator, whoever's going to call it, calls it you enter it exactly that very way. Those are just a couple examples.
I just want to make sure I understood your question. Did you say you were trying to use the retail TPM for food service?
We're using Trade Pro, and we're going to use that same version.
Retail. Yeah, so I see some challenges on your horizon. You know, we are, to be honest, I mean, and I know you want an honest answer, so that's why Chris asked me up here. We actually, as a company, and as I've mentioned, you know, Dannon is still figuring out what we want to be when we grow up in food service. So that's sort of the life cycle of where is food service at Dannon. But we tried to jam that round peg into that square hole for many years. With a retail trade system, not AFS, and it was just never giving us the clarity or the ability to mine data, the ability to control trade the way we needed it. Now, I cannot speak at all to AFS's retail application, so I would just throw that caution to the wind. But in terms of what we need, I just wanted to take a moment. We have two people here from our Utah I'll call them financial control team, and Sandra is sort of my right-hand person on. Sandra and I are a whopping finance team of two for a $200 million business. So it comes down to you need good people, you need tenacity, and you also need the buy-in of the commercial sales folks. Now again, I also sense from being here today, many different companies go about this in many different ways. But initially for us, you know, I'll use this word trade control, sort of falls into finance. And the theory, and I stress the word theory, is that salespeople do their own contracts. And again, I know I'm in an audience of salespeople, not MBAs here, so I'll be on my guard. But sometimes that theory versus reality is quite different. So what we have done, and again, it's a 1.5-year journey so far. You know, what I would say, I think obviously you've got an objective or a need as to why you've entered into this. For us, it was we really had first, we frankly didn't know within $4 or $5 million what our true annual investment was. And we had no system at all for the contract. So that was really step one. So so again, when I talk about people, we have, you know, the team that was involved in the, you know, because with the sales folks, if you're starting from scratch, which is where we were, it's a lot to ask for them to articulate all this very clearly. Sometimes it's not really their game, which I think is fair. And B, it was just not something they were necessarily really held to. So it really started for us is what is all of this detail telling us? What is out there? And then so really it was the first 6 or 8 months or maybe even almost a year for us to build what we thought was the right population of contracts to sort of get our arms around roughly here's how much money we have is out there. What we have just started doing, so for us, really, the finance folks that are with us today, ultimately we're able to highlight, here's what we think we have. Then, of course, it would be liaising with the commercial sales folks to sort of see, yeah, this feels about right. This sort of feels like we have the right population. We also had a person that we still have who has been the liaison to the commercial sales team who has really taken the lead on the contracts. Okay. And frankly, though, liaise has become due, so we're also fighting against that. We have also been a bit disjointed in our sort of our mindset toward using brokers. which we are now aligning to use brokers, and I know there's people in the room that are ahead of me on that, so I'd be interested to maybe hear about that tonight. So I think where we're at now is starting to move toward more of this sales folks having ownership, because they're the first to say they want to understand their business, they want to control the money, they want to make decisions. And maybe it's the accountant in me, but I feel like, well, you kind of have to know what you have and what the implications are before we start going there. So I don't know if that helps you, but I guess my biggest caution would be if you're using a retail application to save money, I would just make sure that you're comfortable that that's going to work.
We did just the opposite what you did. We used the food service platform for everything, including our retail. Okay? We are now here today investigating the retail option. Okay? And like I said, I don't know, I've learned a lot from just listening to these guys over the last couple of days. But I know the promotional part is extremely different. Okay? And so, yes, I mean, so my retail my counterparts in retail are kind of going, you know? So it doesn't functionally do what they want to be able to do because it's fundamentally different. And so to Rob's point, you know, do what you got to do, obviously, but they are different. Okay.
Yeah. Lessons learned, right? Yeah, good point. Okay, next question. Anybody back here? I always wanted to do this. I used to watch Phil Donahue on TV.
Thank you. All right, so my name is Garima, and I'm here from Sabra Dipping Company, part of the finance department. So we're here too. I just wanted to talk, I know, John, you mentioned this about the frequency of the promotions. So we're at the stage now where we're doing analysis on promotions, and we're finding out that maybe we don't want to run this because we're not making any money on it. So how did you open up that dialogue with the sales team? And on our end, we're also involved with the brokers who are entering the promotions for us in our TPM system. So how did you begin that dialogue of dial it back, or yeah, how did that pan out for you?
First of all, I should say that I've had that dialogue before. Markel was a paper company, and when I went in there, trade spend was close to 50%. So that was a harder conversation to have, let me tell you that. But it really comes down to, this is, you know, here's a budget. We're all in. This is what we've got. And by the way, we also include damages as part of our trade budget. So if you've got high damages, that's going to impact your number as well. So the conversation, and again, you need to have senior management alignment. As long as you have, so we had our CFO and our CEO in the room as we had the conversation that said, here is ultimately what we need to get back to. We did not drop the 11 points over the course of 1 year. We kind of like whittled it back little at a time. But a lot of it has to do with proving, right? Sales folks are show-me kind of folks, and I'm one of them, by the way. I've been in sales all my life. So that made it a little bit easier, but it comes down to prove to them that these events that you run that are deeper and less frequent actually drive more incremental revenue. And so if you can show them a couple of examples, and I really think tying category development into trade planning is crucial. I know a lot of companies don't do that. It's kind of like they're two separate departments. In any company that I've ever been in, once we start having conversations, it's like, you know, those two departments really should go under each other, and I end up signing up for that. But it really comes down to, again, proving to the sales organization that it's effective. And then the conversations with the customers, frankly, the conversations with the distributors were very easy. When we went into the distributors and said, you know what, I mean, because if you're doing, and they were passing the money along. It's not like they were putting anything in their pocket. They were passing the money along, but they just really weren't, they had no discipline to how they were doing it. So going in and saying, hey, we're going to basically take control of that money back, and we're going to put it in the hands of the sales team, and then telling the sales team, okay, next year, here's what your budget is for your customer. They soon realized that they couldn't maintain the same frequency. Unless, and in some cases they were able to do this, negotiate some of your ad fees back. I mean, we had people paying rack rate on ad fees, and it's like, well, go negotiate that, you know? I mean, and if you can do that, then you don't have to cut the frequency quite as much. But it's I think it's a learning process, but it really comes down to, you've got to have a couple of wins. And once you have a couple of wins and you can get to that deeper price point and actually afford to fund it, then it becomes a little bit easier in years 2 and 3. Year one is a little challenging. I'm not going to kid you.
Okay. More questions? Right here.
I work in the finance department, and we've had Trade Pro for 4 years, and it's been adversarial with sales from day one, from our director down. And we ended up taking, a year ago, the system basically away from sales. We started entering all the promotions because we were overspending. And it's still, it doesn't matter what we do, it's adversarial. They complain at everything. How do we get sales to see the importance of this?
I'll take it. I wouldn't.
Okay. We're waiting for this answer.
I would highly recommend you consider incenting on net revenue. We had at one point done, gross revenue, and then you would basically ding the sales team if they overspent on their spend rate. The problem is they'd go, well, what do you want me to do? You want me to grow my sales? You want me to grow you want me to grow share, but you don't want me to spend. The minute you turn things, so sales folks don't like to think of 2 numbers. They like to think of 1. And the minute you turn it to net revenue, they quickly realize that anything I spend is going to come off of my gross revenue, and so if I'm being incented on net revenue, which we've done for the last 3 years at Popcorn Indiana, you have a very quick mindset change. And then the other thing, as I had said before, it sounds like, and there's a lot of companies that I've talked to that kind of go down this path where you have this, what it is for a salesperson? You have all of a sudden total visibility into trade spend, and they don't like that, right? I mean, because nobody ever questioned them in the past as to, what they were doing. They were out there spending the money, the deductions would come in. Yeah, I overspent that one, sorry. But the other thing that we have to keep track of, and you went down a path that it's getting it done, and I know you think that that's the right path to go down because the sales folks aren't putting their plans in the system, but they don't own it anymore because to them that's your plans, and I didn't put that in the system. You did, and sorry, but that's not the way the program ran. So I would really question that, and I know it's tough, but if you can get some senior sponsorship to go back, I think that would help.
So I'm going to say time out on the sales folks. Okay. Well, I know you're there too, but I will tell you, there's no easy way to go about it, right? But it's got to start from the top down, right? And really, our team is now incentivized as well. In other words, I say incentivized. Why do we have bonuses? Bonuses are designed to change behavior, right? Your salary is your salary. Bonuses are just it's how you get people to change behavior and change culture, okay? So if you're going to put a bonus program together, make it worth in what you're trying to achieve, right? At Gehl's, our bonus program is based around cost of goods sold and net sales. I have some discretionary side of the bonus side that I can do other things with it. Now, one of the things I did this year was part of the discretionary bonus that I have control over is Trade Pro. So I'll use the measurement tools within the Trade Pro system, because that's the first thing they asked me. Well, how are you going to measure that? I said, well, I can see how many times you're logging in every month. I will look at your deduction balances. I'm going to look at your pending balances. I'm going to look at all those things. But at the same time, sales owns the front end of the system, okay? We own the front loading of the system. Now, that also means that every salesperson doesn't necessarily enter in every single contract. And what I mean by that is we've integrated our broker company out there as well. It's up to the regional sales managers, as an example, to manage the process. They don't necessarily have to enter in every single contract, but they're responsible for the contract, right? And they're responsible for that front ending of the system. So I encourage weekly conference calls with the broker, with their monthly calls and monthly assessments of priorities based on what the needs assessment are at the time with both the customer service reps as well as the broker reps, okay? But it's got to be the bonuses. And one of the things that we actually did, because our pendings got a little on the high side, okay? I actually called everybody in, and I spent time for an entire week. And we literally sat around the conference table for a week and did nothing but to clear our pendings. That meant entering contracts in. I didn't care who you were or what you did. And I sat there right with them. I didn't move the whole time. Confiscated cell phones, and their computers, laptops were only opened up to Trade Pro. I gave them breaks, okay? I gave them breaks, all right, because we still have to conduct business, okay? But just by doing all that for an entire week, we also developed a camaraderie amongst the group. We actually came together better as a sales group at the same time because we had a very focused objective. And I think we cleared, 50 or 60% of all of our pendings that we had. And so we also had accomplishments. And of course, I said, my goal is I want all the pendings cleared. People at Trade Pro said, you're crazy, okay? But we're only going to achieve to the expectations that we set, right? So I wanted the high expectations. Now, we did a great job, okay? But the team came together, so but that was one of the last times I had them physically enter in all the contracts. After that, you guys got to manage the business. My 2 cents.
I just very quickly, because a lot has been said, but as a finance person up here, in a business that has a lot of topside growth potential, yogurt is a developing category in the United States. But we're not big enough to have a direct sales force, so we have a broker network. I don't know how motivated brokers are when they wake up in the morning to sell yogurt versus some other bigger ticket items. But for me, there's a fine line between, as a finance person, my first goal is to have people spend as little time doing that type of work and doing as much time as they can in the field selling. So there's a very delicate balance there, and I think what we've found is trying to, as has just been prescribed, we do use this person that sort of reports softly into finance, but truly is the liaison to get a lot of the contracts done. I think what that has done is gone a little bit too far toward her reliance, but we haven't lost them in terms of them still feeling ownership for that money. And for that stuff being right. So I think I come to say I'm in the middle on this one, meaning I don't want to push salespeople into their desk and their computer. And the other point I say is they also have a job managing brokers. And I think that broker organizations are set up in some cases to efficiently handle some of that load.
I'm just really surprised to hear that there's a difference of opinion between sales guys and finance. I thought you guys all thought alike. Go ahead, Dan.
So just to add to it, I think one of the things in order to get sales to have more ownership is you need to have the change management to make them be the business owner of their customers. And that starts with what's the contribution? And Trade Pro connects that. I mean, John talked a little bit. He said, well, I use net sales, but I would go right to contribution, and then the information coming out of Trade Pro from all your trade spending, your promotions, whatever, is a way to provide the information to your salespeople to have the facts to go back to their customers. I mean, I know myself had some customers in the past where they were totally unprofitable. Okay, that's a real easy negotiation with the customer because you can go in and say, you know what, hey, we got to change this up, and I don't make any money with you. So we either change it up or we stop doing business this way. And it's interesting because some of the customers, obviously, they'll push back. I won't go into the details, but, and they didn't believe me. But I shut them off because I'm like, well, you know what? I'm not making any money, so, you know, I'll just cut it out. And I'm in better shape than the other way. And you know, lo and behold, the customer comes back, and you get into more of a win-win balance. But I think getting the customer managers to run it as their business and that business thinking is the way to get them more engaged. And then the only other thing I would add is I'm a big believer in when you give them your targets to have a variable spending per case as the way to allocate the monies that they have so that it goes up and down with the business. I personally like that approach. It doesn't inhibit growth, but it protects you fiscally on the downside. So I know everybody has different views on that, but I have had a lot of success with that. And then also over time, providing your salespeople with guidance on you know, what is the optimum way to promote an item by channel. So it's every channel. You know, what should be the everyday price? What should be the promoted price? What should be the frequency of those promotions? What, over the whole year, what should be the average price versus competition? And yeah, nobody can, you know, get there, but you strive to go after that guideline. It takes some time to develop those, but I think it's well worth it. So I think the combination of all of those things helps you get sales involved. You have to get the mindset that they're just buying cases. You know, that you have to break that. So.
I wanted to ask about deductions. I heard a lot of talk about deductions and non-compliant transactions and those kind of things. Is that a big issue, or how big of an issue is that, and you know, what are you doing about it? Anybody?
So on deductions, I mean, so with trade pro, I mean, when you have a good system like this and you know what you spent and you know what you were supposed to get for it, the deductions actually become very easy because you know, you can follow up and you have facts. Whereas if you get those crazy audits, you know, 3 years back and 4 years back, and you don't have good records, you know, you just get taken. It's just a big game between us and our customers on, you know, who can steal the most money. So I think the better the system, I think, you know, systems like Trade Pro and other ones where, you know, we've organized them around an activity, so your whole monies and what you're doing is grouped as an activity, and you can track it as an activity. You know, I'm old enough that I remember, and maybe some of you are too, back in the day, and this is true around the globe in varying degrees. It's not true too much anymore in the United States, but it used to be you just give a deal, you know, a 30-day deal, you know, $2 off, whatever, and everybody'd get it, and wahoo, and you'd try to load the quarter and make your numbers, which, you know, that's another problem. That change to where you're just giving money off to an activity-based trade spending approach, where it's a pay-for-performance, as I call it, where you're actually evaluating, okay, well, what am I getting for that money? I think that move really did a lot to help control the deductions, because now you know, well, I did this, I was supposed to spend this much money, the customer took, you know, more or less, and then you can reconcile it in a better way. And I can tell you, you know, from experience, by having that track record, you don't get taken by the customers. We were talking about it before the meeting, about examples where you had to fight back. There was a customer, it was actually in the southeast for me, that they took $380,000. Well, thank God I had a good enough system to identify it. And they, you know, I had to go into them with a broker at the time to get the money back. And, you know, it was ridiculous, but I got the money back. You know, they brought us in at 4, they didn't meet us till 6, they turned the air conditioning off, it was in the summer. You know, it's the typical, all the moves, you go in, it's like a little kid, you know, you took the money, give it back. No, I'm not giving it back. Yeah, give it back. I mean, honest to God, I did. I thought I was like arguing like on a playground or something. But what happens when you do have that good records is, okay, in this case, I got the money back. It was they bought a chain up in Baltimore and took listing or slotting fees, $380,000. I ended up spending more money with them, but getting more for it. And so instead of I lose, you win type of approach, it ended up being a big win-win for both of us, because both of us made more money. I know for a fact I was one of the few, I think might have been the only consumer packaged goods company at the time that actually went in and got the money back. Everybody else just said, oh, I guess they took it, that's it. So, it's that behavior as well. So knowing where it is and then saying, okay, no, this is the rules of the game, and fighting and getting the money back and using it for something that's more productive.
Yeah, for me, I have a little bit of a different philosophy on deductions than I think a lot of other people do. I think generally it has an immediate association with something bad and immediately leads to invalids. But in some way, I think of deductions as just another mode for payment versus a check. And frankly, for us, but in our company, and I'm sure in many others, if there's a high deduction balance, that's bad, and if it's low, that's good. But what I would argue is when my deduction balance was low, I had no control over my trade. And then when I started taking control over my trade, my deduction balance went very high. And then, of course, that was unacceptable because that means something bad. So we spent, the better part of a year getting that deductions balance back in order. But what that really meant is they were piling up because we were trying to make sure they were valid, and we were trying to make sure we had agreements in place. So I think if you've got your arm, again, and forgive me, I speak a bit with a food service slant, but I know a bit about retail. I think it's somewhat the same thing. As long as you have a fairly good system for knowing what has been offered and what is legitimate and what is not, I'm comfortable with a check versus a deduction versus an off invoice, as long as we have the appropriate processes for controlling the three. But I will say, for those of you who are starting from scratch, and we certainly made mistakes that I, in our launch of AFS, et cetera. But what I tell you is it may go up before it gets better, and I think you may hear that from some of the frontline team of AFS as well. And I think that scared people, like, oh, it's getting more out of control. But frankly, it was just, there was a gate. And we've definitely found, some monies that we didn't know were out there in the past. They're definitely starting to trigger conversations of, one example I'll use that's simple to understand. We have a fairly good-sized school business. We do a fairly, we participate in school lunch programs nationally. So we sell a fairly low-priced product, and but a strategic one as well. And what I will say is, we had no idea what those arrangements were out there. And as we started to get our arms around that, we very quickly start to see certain deductions or monies for school product, and right away say, wait a second, that's not supposed to be happening. That's not what we've talked about. So it absolutely is starting to pay off in that regard.
And I would just add, getting the deduction balance down is obviously important, but making sure the deductions are valid, as we've heard, is really key. And I think there should also be some KPIs around deductions, so we actually clear deductions in-house. We don't expect the sales folks to do that. We have a team that's actually tied to our receivables team that clears deductions based on what's in the system. The deduction balance, our deduction balance was out of control. I'll tell you, it was close to $6 million on a $23 million business. It is now $400,000 on a $100 million business. So it really comes down to, having some KPIs against the process from a standpoint of not just clearing the deductions, but if you can't clear the deductions because we will not allow a deduction to be cleared without clearing it to a program. So if there's not a program in the system, the deduction actually gets put into another status. Awaiting sales is what it's called, and then we go back to the sales folks and say, we need, if it's valid, we need a promotion. If it's not valid, then we're gonna go back and try to get our money back from the customer, and we might need your help doing it. But I think, again, measuring it and having some expectations going in helps.
Not much really to add. It really is a method of payment, right? It really truly is, and how you manage that method of payment. So as you're embarking on your new expedition here, right, you got to decide, are you going to send checks or are you going to do deductions? Maybe a little bit of both, maybe, right? I would actually say that the check side of the business is more important than the deduction side of the business, right? Because you're in food service, your operators are usually getting checks cut. They're not deducting. Your distributors are going to deduct. They're very happy, okay? Our job is to make sure that it's the right deduction, like we talked about. It's just like manufacturing. It's really like Trade Pro becomes your HACCP procedures for finance, right? And so that's really what we're talking about here is that expect your deduction balance to go up. Just expect it to start with. And then as you work the process, it'll go back down again, and then it'll level off. We made some definitely mistakes along the way, so just the way it is. But I would actually argue, keep track of your checks first. Deductions will happen and you'll be taking care of it, but you start missing those people that expect checks, forget about it. That's when you're really in trouble.
Okay, we could probably get one more question in before we let these guys go. Anybody have one final question? Everybody's thinking about happy hour. Okay, I'd like to just ask maybe go down the line one last time if there's, all of you, obviously a lot of interest in this topic, so any final, words of wisdom, best practices, general comments, what would you suggest to the people in this room that they do when they get back to their companies?
Well, okay, I guess I'll start. Real quick, from the lessons learned from us, you have to work it. It's actually going to require a higher degree of workload because of the checks and balances along the way, right? So I don't expect it just to arbitrarily happen, right? It's a very system. When you have full visibility and everything that's now going on, you've got to work the system. There's just no two ways about it. And it actually might even require more manpower. It might require more people involved than you might have expected to begin with. And again, there's nothing wrong with that because it's a very critical part of our business, right? So those are the lessons that we learned along the way, that you have to work it. It's not going to just, you're not going to put a contract in and everything will just go right through the system, right? Because you're going to ultimately manage by exception a lot of times. So be prepared to manage by exception and to work the system and to spend time against it and change the cultural habits along the way, because in some cases, for us, it was going from the dinosaur age to a very sophisticated system. So you also have to think about, do you have the right people now in the right position to be able to manage the process? So it's not just it could be a different skill set than what you originally had before.
Yeah, I would echo that, and I would also say just don't settle. So whatever you expected the system to be going into it, whatever you wanted it to be, that is what it should be. And don't let anything stand in the way from a standpoint of, sorry, we thought we were going to be able to do it this way, but this team, and I'm not going to blame the sales guys this time. Sometimes it's the finance folks too. They just won't let us do what we want to do with the system, so don't settle. The other thing is really from a standpoint of right from the implementation on, involve as many people in the organization as you can. I shouldn't say as many people, as many cross-functional areas. Every area in the company has an opportunity to get some value out of the system, from production planning to finance to sales operations, obviously sales. Everyone has the opportunity to get some value out of the system, and it really comes down to showing them the what's in it for me, and then I think the implementation goes smoother and the system's more successful.
And I align with what's just been said. Again, for us, it's been a year and a half. And certainly there's been some pain points along the way, but stay the course. There's definitely money out there. There's money there. There's no way, it's impossible for there not to be money there. And then I think it's important, we mentioned cross-functionality. I think it's important that you align your objectives. I think you check in on that every so often. You make sure you have, you know, sort of folks' spirits high around this process, cross-functionally. I think that, you know, you need to have milestones as well. So again, for us, it was sort of get the contract population there, okay? Then we want to make sure we're making some good use of the monies. We want to make sure then we're starting to get some good information to share with the team, et cetera. So stay the course and keep moving the ball in the right direction down the field.
Yeah, my advice is, you know, I would step your way through it. First part is you got to get control of the money. So you got to have your targets set up well, your planning of your volume. You got to know, you know, where the money's going and control it. Once you have that piece, then the next step is, okay, how do you spend it better? And that's where you look at customer profitability and you do your promotion evaluations and you come up with the optimum way to sell your items, and then you instill in your sales force this whole, I mentioned it, pay for performance approach. You know, what am I getting for that money? And not only, you know, is it worth it? Am I getting a good return for the money? But then also, did I get what I paid for? So following up on the execution. You know, you know, Mr. or Mrs. Customer, you said you were going to do this, but you didn't. You know, and following back and saying, okay, you know, I need to make good. Or you got to give me another promotion because you didn't do what we said you were going to do. So I think, you know, all those things combined is where you have to go. And, you know, it was mentioned, Jeff said it too, that whole process or the ways of working, you know, you got to instill that in your organization. And it's multi-functional. I mean, it is finance. It is, you know, if you have customer service and your sales guys all need to be in there, and it needs to be fed on the guidelines from your marketing or your category manager or channel development areas.
Great advice. I'd like to thank each of you for, you know, sharing your insights, your experience, and for, you know, being willing to sit here very candidly and talk about a very sensitive and important topic. So thank you all for your participation, and could I have a round of applause, please, for our panel?